everyone, I'm Sally, International Film Policy Analyst, and my colleague Mengci is International Film Data Analyst from a non-profit organization, UK-China Film Collab, and we will chair this panel together today, titled Film Data and Policy Between UK and China. So welcome to the fifth discussion panel, hosted by UK-China Film Collab. As part of Chinese cinema season, an online film festival which will show over 50 Chinese language films between February and May. The festival is co-presented by Trinity Sign Asia Filming East Festival and UK-China Film Collab. This week, the topic is about the utilization and regulation of film data in the UK and China. And this is a subject in which we should all be deeply interested because it concerns the development of global film industries in the future. The panel seeks the opportunities of Sino-UK business academic collaboration in future film data evaluation and protection. So let me take a little time to introduce the schedule of our panel today. It is our great honor to have invited three fantastic speakers from both China and the UK. Each of them will give a talk in their specialized field, and after that, we will have an open discussion between our panelists. And we encourage our audience to join the dialogue if the topics interest you. Meanwhile, if you have any questions during the speaker's talk, please type your questions in the chat, and we will see that our speakers will also try to answer those questions in the discussion. So thanks for your time. Now it is a great pleasure for me to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Xiaobai Shen. Shen is the senior lecturer in international and Chinese business at University of Edinburgh Business School. And Dr. Shen is currently a visiting professor in Peking University Law School. She is also associate editor of the Journal of Science and Technology Policy Management. So today she will provide a whole picture of our topic first and share the research on digital online literature, music, and film in China, where internet giants are playing the key role. So Dr. Shen, I will turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Low quality shows, of course, I think, you should not listen to me. I might be outdated. And I see that there is a weakness in Chinese movie industry, but if I come back to the UK, what is the weaknesses I found before I did my research in 2016, I saw that in the West in general, after digital revolution, the many new initiatives that challenged the incumbent industrial film industry in income distribution and the way of consumption had this, this challenge had arisen but soon faded. I feel it's very disappointing. The trouble is the powerful oligopolistic players, for example, Big Five in film industry. And because for them, they still, were still holding on while the society was screaming, appealing for a change. I feel that, before I did my research, that this is what I see. The other issue I feel that is the privacy. and the whole society is quite skeptical about the data collection and the usage. And I think the privacy that issues in the UK is based on the liberal spirit, but the lack of detailed understanding from practices. We know the right to privacy in legal terms is extremely vague. To my opinions, inapplicable. According to earliest definition of the US jurists, Warren and Brandeis, in their book, they define the right to privacy is right to be let alone. Right to be let alone. Does that do any good to a society? You know, we know Rousseau's first open line of the book Social Contract is that man was born free and he is everywhere in chains. In particular, we see today's pandemic. You can't just leave people alone, leave yourself alone. The society needs to act together. You know, we see China, 6 weeks after the lockdown in Wuhan, it emerged, successfully containing pandemic. But in the UK, after a year, lockdown after lockdown, and we still, the UK is the death toll of the UK is the highest in Europe. So I think something, that is I feel this obstacles, although the spirit, the liberal spirit is great, but I think it's obstacles for data, using data collection and data usage. And I did my research, I led a research in 2016 and 2017. So, but I'm not going to talk in great detail. You can retrieve the material from the website, it's already there. And only one thing I want to say, I think that time I was very excited and to see the changes brought by digital and internet technologies in China. We know, biggest problem in movie industry is risk management. Every movie costs around, I think it's about $100 million US. Yeah, includes the production, distribution, and the marketing. The success rate, according to one of our PhD students in our business school, was around 40%. So it was such a waste. So that is why all this in the US film studios, they're focusing on the blockbuster movies, and diversity is lacking. But I think in China, something good in China is and that time I thought it's excellent. We saw the new powerful players emerged in China as in creative culture industries are online players. Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, they have their own core businesses, but their engagement with creative culture industry, because they've got data, they know what people want. So one thing I wanted to mention here is how they use the data to leverage the value. They started when they see a book, an online book. This is the book's called Hua Qiangu. It's an online book, and it's very popular. And then they made it into the TV series, and then later on they signed a contract with and for the film deals with Lionsgate. So you can see, this kind of way of doing things for the business is very successful. But of course, there is issues about out there is competing for the super IPs, between large giant, the companies like Alibaba and Tencent. There's issues out there. So, and come down to China, I feel there is the strings, it's the data, and also the issues about the privacy. Privacy is not a concept in China. People's understanding of the database services is based on their lived experience. And they have been used mobile payment, commerce, since 2003. So this is experience give them the idea about what is the data collection and the usage. And in particular today, the health QR code, and contact tracing technology, give them experience about how what does privacy means. It is not that vague, it's very concrete for them. Of course, the weakness are there. Lots of weaknesses are out there. I think one thing, although I might out of date, but I feel it is the inefficient, the cumbersome censoring mechanism that's over there. And or if all the movies, TV series need to be censored by the state, that would be very inefficient. Although I think censoring mechanism needs to be there. In particular, if we have the industry, the full of the crime and the sexualities, there is a problem there. But I feel that China need is a people-centered surveillance. Today's system, we look at the movie industry, today's system is one too many inspections, very inefficient, cannot capture the diverse needs and demands of Chinese people. And that's a need to create many surveillance mechanism using data to understand what people want. That using that system to ensure that movie TV will reflect people's life, their sorrow and happiness. Of course, at the same time, still can wait on the uplifting people's spirit for the socialist construction. So I think that's just something I feel I think I wanted to say, and I should stop here. And we know there is a Chinese old saying called 抛砖引玉. So it means to use through the rough stone to draw the exquisite, beautiful, precious jade. I think so that I hope I have done this job to start to kick off, and also I asked my friends in China who I met during the research and to join our panel. One is Li Wei, who's the legal chief for Alibaba's entertainment, and also former chief legal Wang Dongmei, who was a chief legal for Huai and brother. I'm not sure whether they are here now. Oh, now I just see Li Wei won't be able to come. She said she's on the plane for the trip. China's already the business as usual. I really envy. But I should stop here, and thank you very much for listening to my talk. Okay, thank you. I can't hear you. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I forgot to turn on the mic. And thank you very much, Dr. Shen. Thanks for sharing your insights with us. So let me introduce our next speaker, and also I will turn the host over to Mengci. But also before that, because our second speaker, He Yu, is from China, the Maoyan entertainment, and so I will let everyone to try the interpretation. So if you see the bar of the under at the Zoom, you will see the interpretation over there. So you can choose Chinese or English according to your preference. So yeah, so then you probably will hear Chinese or English. It might be a little delay, but I hope it works. So Mengci, over to you now. And thanks, He Yu, for coming.
我这边可以开始了，对吗？
Also, do you need to introduce our speaker?
OK， 嗨，英国的朋友们，大家好，我是贺玉，来自猫眼儿，猫眼儿是现在中国最大的一个互联网购票平台。那我这边很高兴收到这个主办方的邀请，有这样一个机会来跟大家分享。那接下来我会分享一下猫眼儿在这方面通过数据对电影行业的一些探索应用。
Oh, hi everyone. My name is He Yu. Now, today I'm going to talk about Maoyan. Maoyan is the biggest online film taking platform. I will talk more about Maoyan in my presentation.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
No.
Are you sharing a screen with us now?
Yes.
No, we cannot see this screen yet. Or maybe Mengci, can you share the screen?
Yes, I'm trying to share my screen to how to present the slides. Sorry, wait a minute. Okay. Before her sharing, I'm glad to introduce about He Yu. The second speaker, He Yu, she is the senior analyst of Maoyan Entertainment China. Maoyan Entertainment is the leading internet platform providing innovative services and data to players across China's entertainment industry. He Yu will share the insights of how Maoyan has gathered user data from its app to benefit film distribution. We will invite Dr. Xiang to kindly be our interpreter for He Yu.
那我先来介绍一下猫眼娱乐。猫眼其实是最早是做票务起家的，就是电影的线上售票平台。那之后呢，逐渐是向这个电影的产业链的上游发展。目前我们的业务板块，然后已经覆盖了开发、制作、营销、发行的各个电影环节。业务领域呢，也逐渐扩展到演出和体育赛事。现在是一家泛娱乐的公司。
First of all, I'm going to introduce a little bit Maoyan. Maoyan is first of all is online ticketing, is doing a ticketing business. Yeah, can you hear me? It's an online ticketing platform. Then it's began to switch to more like industrial focus.
Can you hear me, Dr. Xiang? Can you interpret out this her speaker speaking?
Sorry, who is speaking now? Okay.
Sorry, there may be some troubles from our interpreter, Dr. Xiang.
of you need to
Well, if I choose English channel, I can hear her.
So you can heard her from the English channel.
Okay, so if we switch to the English channel, we should be able to hear Xiang. And if we switch to the Chinese channel, we should be able to hear He Yu.
Okay, so let me continue.
Okay.
So our business focus has already covered distribution, marketing, and exhibition, and it's also covered into like performance and also like sports competition. It's a quite like a comprehensive cooperation.
Are we waiting for He Yu to continue?
能听到吗？
好，贺老师，您可以继续了。
那猫眼这边的快速发展也是受惠于国内大环境的变化，因为随着中国内地的互联网购票发展和普及，到2020年底，就是去年年底，票房的线上化率已经达到了86.1%。
Is also conditioned to the bigger environment in mainland China, with the popularity of online film ticketing service in mainland China. By the end of 2020, online ticketing box office has reached 86.1%.
那猫眼现在已经成为国内最大的互联网交易平台，然后覆盖的购票用户是3.8亿，影城的覆盖合作的影城是1万家以上，同时也是国内最早的能实现秒级更新实时票房的一个公司。
So as the largest online film ticketing platform, Moyan has reached Moyan has the largest audience in China, and also has reached over 380 million users and over 10,000 movie theaters.
那所以我们猫眼其实是拥有海量的样本的，我们包括一些用户决策的，还有一些交易行为的数据，都是我们能够做数据探索的一个前提。
So Moyan has a really big sample. So with the they process an enormous database of user decision making and purchasing behaviors.
那我其实这边是来自于猫耳研究院。那其实猫耳研究院是在猫耳娱乐下面的，一个为电影产业提供数据服务的一个专业咨询机构。
So I'm based in Moyan Research Institute. It's based on Moyan Entertainment company, and it provides professional data consulting service across China's film and.
那我们这边主要是为电影项目提供数据的决策依据，包括制作阶段、宣发阶段和放映等各个环节。
So we mainly provide film projects based on our big data and analytical capabilities. For example, we covered film production, distribution, and exhibition.
那我直接来讲购票指数吧。就是如果把一部电影的票房做拆解，下2页。 OK，就是如果把一部电影的票房做拆解的话，我们这边认为是有2个核心指标，一个就是电影的可营销性，另外一个是影片的可观赏性。
So if we look up a film's box office data, there's 2 main evaluation values. The first one is the appreciation value, and then the second one is the marketing value.
可营销性呢，就是一个电影它有热情，观众去有热情买票的一个潜力，它决定了影片的首日票房。包括像卡司啊、阵容、题材，然后是不是 IP，包括一些其他的宣传带来的因素，都是决定了它的营销性。
So marketing value stands for the film's possibility of appealing a larger audience. It determines the first day box office, for example, like cast, crew, film genre, or whether it's related to the trendy topic, and also the current market environment also can determine the marketing value of the film.
那可观赏性其实就是影片的口碑，代表着观众的一个观影后的满意程度。那观赏性越高，那票房的后续续航能力就越强。
The appreciation value actually is the film's reputation. It stands for like to what extent the audience is satisfied after viewing, and like the higher the reputation, or we say the appreciation value is, and the higher impact the box office can be.
那如何判断影片的可营销性和可观赏性的？我们在这里其实都用到了大数据。
So how do we recognize the film's marketing value and appreciation value? We all use big data.
可营销性方面，我们这边有个自己独有的判断指标，叫做摩尔购票指数。
So in terms of the marketing value, we have our own ticketing index.
那在说明这个购票指数之前，我先介绍另外一个指标，叫做猫儿想看。这个指标是电影宣发时所有片方、营销方最关心的数据，也是我们所有数据分析的基础。
So before we talk about the Moyen ticketing index, I will introduce you another important figure. It's called Moyen want to watch. So for this, it's like before the film marketing and the production side is they focus the most on this data, and also Moyen Research Institute is mainly based on this analysis, and it will be also discussed in the later case studies.
那猫儿想看就是用户在猫儿 APP 浏览一部影片以后，点击想看的行为，那点击想看的人数越多，这部影片的热度就代表它越高。
So Moyen want to watch is like when the user is using Moyen app and they are browsing information of a film, so they can click want to watch this button. We think the more people click want to watch, and the higher the trend of the film can be.
那我举个例子，像复联4，在中国内地上映的时候，猫耳的总想看人数是185万。那春节档上映的《唐探3》映前的猫耳想看总人数是457万，是打破了所有影片的历史记录。
So for example, Avengers Endgame in mainland China before its premiere in mainland China, Moyen want to watch has reached 1,850,000. And then also Detective Chinatown 3 during the Screen Festival season before the premiere there's 4,560,000 users has clicked Moyan Want to Watch.
那刚刚提到的购票指数就是我们基于猫耳显看做的一个模型优化。它使用大数据的算法，可以用来预测影片的首日票房。目前的相关性能达到0.84。
So the ticketing index we mentioned before is like a module based on the big data algorithm of Moyan Want to Watch. So at the moment, this the accuracy can reach about 0.84.
那在可观赏方面，我们这边也跟好莱坞一样，是使用试映会来判断，但是我们的样本相对会更加精准一点，因为通过我们的数据库可以筛选到最有代表性的观众参加试映。
In terms of the appreciation value, we do something similar to Hollywood. We like can organize some like a preview with the audience in order to make our sample more accurate. So based on the Moyan big data, we can select more representative audience to attend the premium. The premium. So like before the premium day, we can have accurate data for the film.
那在刚刚过去的2020年春节档，我们其实就用到了刚才讲的指标。然后另外，其实李焕英就是我们都不知道大家听过李焕英没？你好，李焕英没有？他其实也是逆袭了大热 IP《唐探三》。对，其实这也是一个数据全程保驾护航的一个结果。
So in the past spring festival season, I don't know if you have heard of this film, Hi Mom. It has like surpassed over 7.8 billion box office, and it's also surpassed the most trendy film, Chinatown Detective 3, is also this kind of data monitoring achievement.
那其实，在去年年底，我们猫耳研究院就已经通过试映会，就是预判了这个影片的高口碑评分。所以整个的项目团队呢，在制定宣传的计划目标时候，其实就是为了就是目标就是确保影片的映前热度保持在档期第2位，不要被第1名的《唐探三》拉开太大距离。
Okay, so actually, at the end of last year, Moyan Research Institute has already used preview to justify the high rating of the film, and also the whole team has already scheduled marketing purpose to ensure that before the premiere, the film can stay in at least the second place of the trend.
那我们这边也是通过数据分析，然后帮他就是提供了这种全程的伴随式的监测和咨询服务，然后也帮他突破了他的目标。
So we based on our data analysis, so we can provide this data monitoring and consulting service for this film, and then we finally help them to achieve their purpose.
那举几个简单的大数据应用。首先是我们会对影片的宣传节奏进行建议。
So if we have a look at some like case studies, first of all, we will gave some suggestion in terms of the rhythm of marketing.
我们在过往的项目中发现，就是说在一些特定的时间点里，关注电影的人群会自然的变多，比如说像元旦，比如说像影片开启预售的这个时间点。那如果选择在这个时间点加大宣传力度的话，效率其实会更高。
So based on our past project, we found if we focus on some like a certain time period, we can achieve better marketing results. For example, during the spring festival season, there's like a huge growth of in Moyan's database.
那图表是2018年春节档的影片，能看到是在元旦的时候，就是一条灰色线，《飞驰人生》它的猫儿想看日增反超了第1名《疯狂外星人》。
So we can see on the slides, this figure is for films in the during the Spring Festival in 2019. For example, this film called 飞驰人生 Pegasus, like it's the first film in the green line you can see, so it can surpass the other one called Crazy Alien, which is also one of the most famous Chinese film at that time.
所以我们建议李焕英抓住元旦档的这个电影观众流量的红利来扩大电影的宣传。
So we suggest that Hi Mom, that the film we mentioned in the last slides, so they can really season the audience during the Spring Festival season.
所以在下页里就能看到，其实这样的一个结果，李焕英就全程没有被《唐探3》的热度甩掉队，他也是分别通过在圣诞和元旦档发布的一些非常重要的预告片或者 MV， 把其他的影片甩在了身后。
So from this slides, we can see Hi Mom, it's didn't it's like it's quite follow the Chinatown Detectives step, and it also published some very important information during Christmas and the New Year. So it has still stays on the trend of on social media and also the big data.
那另外一个对数据的应用，其实就是对同档期影片人群分流的判断。
So another features is that we can take more audience from other films based on the big data.
能从这个图表上看到，其实电影上映前，《唐探3》对李焕英的分流是最大的。
So from this chart, we can see Chinatown Detective 3 takes the most like audience from Hi Mom.
所以我们建议李焕英当时是要强调2部影片的差异化传播，比如说都是合家欢的类型，《唐探3》更多的是热闹，但李焕英的话，其实它更多是情感。
So we suggested Hi Mom to focus on like a differentiated marketing communication. For example, they both kind of a family drama, but Chinatown Detective 3 is more like lively and amusing, but Hi Mom is more focusing on emotion.
那后续的宣传过程中，李焕英也确实是将情感和母爱这一主题发挥的非常好。我们对这个指标也进行了跟踪监测。其实在映前的话，它其实有大幅的一个下降的，就是效果比较好。
So actually, Hi Mom, indeed, during the marketing process, indeed made a lot of effort on this this topic motherhood, and we also based on our data monitoring, and they did really well on this.
那除此以外，我们的这个大数据还能够对物料进行评估。
Apart from this, we can also like evaluation the marketing content.
比如我们这边通过大数据分析，就针对物料设立了完播率和想看转化率这2个核心指标，然后用来评估物料的吸引力。
So like based on our based on our big data, we have like establish this like two figures. One is called like complete complete viewing figure, and the other one is want to watch converting figure.
这2个指标除了能够评估预告片的整体效果，也能看到分人群的具体表现。
So these two figures can also have a look at the like the possibility of the like of appealing audience, and also think about how to divert the audience into different trends.
下一页，所以这些不同人群的表现，是否跟片方的目标一致，其实都可以用来检测这个物料的一个宣传效果。
So we can base on this data to think about the result and the impact of the marketing content.
那再下一页，就除此以外，其实猫耳研究院现在能做的事情还有很多。我这边就简单介绍一下，包括我们开发制作阶段都可以做的一些 IP 的评估，制作阶段我们可能做的试映，然后宣传阶段我们做的一些热度监测，然后包括一些营销效果的评估，包括映后的一个出口调研，都是我们在做的一个事情。利用大数据，同时我们利用大数据也会去分析一下市场的趋势，比如说去年在中国疫情的情况下，市场的一个变化等等。
So from this slides, you can see we can look like apart from the other things I talked before, you can see we can also provide a lot of other services like data service and data productive service, and also this research service. For example, during the COVID crisis last year, we also evaluate how the film market is affected.
这些就是我想举的案例。那总的来说，我们大数据的应用其实就是帮助电影项目验证它的策略，帮助它规避风险。
So this is basically my main point, and basically our big data in Moyan is trying to evaluate the marketing strategy and also to avoid possible risk in film industry.
谢谢大家，我这部分就分享完了。
Thanks everyone. That's all my part.
Thank you for Ms. Hers's brilliant sharing. Now is our last speaker. It's Philip Mordecai. He is the founder and managing director of Florida Consultancy. Florida is a UK-based boutique consultancy providing specialist advice for investors, premium content owners, SaaS providers and exhibitors within the film and live events industry. Philip will share his experience, past and present investigations of the UK film industry related to the data gathering.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Wow, there's some impressive statistics in that last presentation from Moyen. I think it puts a whole new perspective to big data. That's the scale of that is just ginormous versus what we have here certainly in the UK, never mind Europe. Some of the volumes that they were looking at there, you can only put into comprehension if you were to think about the number of people in Europe is just over 700 million. And you can see the size of their number of users, I believe, was 350 million. So that alone just gives you an idea. So I appreciate what was being spoken there, and it's not an easy task what's being achieved. Certainly the data that's coming through their system is not only the volume of that and the accuracy allows from a statistical point of view, but the cross-pollination of data to allow you to achieve. And I think for me, it's that bottom of the pyramid on that last slide that really showed the kind of the research and testing side of script, and that is where really, I think from the film ecosystem as a whole is where actually you're seeing a lot of that kind of strategy being played out in a different way with many of the studios' direct-to-consumer offerings. And it happened in the TV and pay TV business a few years ago where they would offer a direct-to-consumer streaming option, but really it was just a kind of an information grab to see what people would really want, diehard fans, and they would launch a direct-to-consumer offering. Now, obviously, that was way before the pandemic came along, and it's changed the approach. But the studios originally were using that source of real data to try and help upstream activities, whether it be film script productions, marketing strategies, etc. And that's really where I've come at this. It's slightly a different approach, but interestingly, it converges with some of the topics. So I'll just have a quick start. I appreciate we're running out of time, so I'll keep going. All right. So who am I? As been politely introduced, Phil Mordecai. I am the managing director of Florido. I recently was the head of digital ventures at Curzon, who is, some of you may or may not know, is an integrated cinema group. It's been around for nearly 90 years in London, and it has an integrated value chain of its own. It has film distribution and marketing. It has its own cinema circuit, but it also pioneered the direct-to-home consumer offering from an exhibitor point of view. So it owned that end consumer relationship. And that for me was something which about 7-8 years ago, I came on board to help build for Curzon. In 2018, I was given the award by Grant Thornton as the face of the UK vibrant economy, which I was very pleased about. So from my perspective, I'm coming at this, although I'm a consultant now, I've actually come from within the film industry, and I've looked at this and some of the sort of machine learning and data analysis point. I did some of that, but certainly nothing on the scale of what my own team are looking at. Florido, as we mentioned, I'm helping companies who are looking at this equation now of how to engage with audiences. And it's certainly not just at the footfall door where someone crosses into the cinema. Actually, it starts much before that. And my sort of, my analogy to this is always in a way that film engagement and consumer engagement is actually a bit like taking a business class flight. You actually buy a flight to somewhere on a business class ticket, but your experience with business class starts as soon as the limousine picks you up from the door of your house and takes you to the lounge. And then from the lounge, you get onto the plane, and then you have a nice flight. But then after, you get taken to your hotel, and then you do it back. But you only bought a ticket. And the idea would be the experience is much more elongated than the actual purchase. So that's what I see with film, and certainly the experience before film or going to watch a film in the cinema starts way before that experience of, or the decision to buy that ticket to go to the venue. And that's what I've been helping a lot of venues. Now many of them are shut right now. A lot of questions are being asked from live events venues, and not just cinemas, but anywhere that has a kind of physical presence. How do they engage with their audience digitally? So yeah, that's me. That's where we go. All right. So how does this compare to what we've seen? What is the UK and what is really the UK as, or I've start with the UK, but it transfers to Europe as a whole. Very fragmented. The value chain is very fragmented. We don't have such a big central aggregator or the ability to achieve that actually because of the 20 odd countries in the European Union, but also the sheer number of different languages at play here. There's different rules, different legal frameworks, etc. On the country of origin, but also on a holistic EU level. In the UK, and then when you add on top of that, there are so many players. Yes, whilst the film value chain is in some cases owned and is becoming more centralized by the vendors, certainly the studios are going further upstream in their involvement and then downstream to own the consumer directly and circumventing some of the aggregational outlets such as cinemas or platforms themselves. But data is very introvert. People are very paranoid about data. They see it as power. And actually they're not willing to disclose that data out. So it's very much held now. There's lots of guesswork about Netflix and many of the other platforms' viewership numbers, and many of the big data platforms such as Nielsen are trying to get to a way of predicting that in the same way as TV advertising had a data platform to achieve that. But let's be clear, it's still very private. No one really knows what the viewership or the engagement or the pre-engagement or the post-engagement, any type of engagement with that content, except for the actual platforms or the content owners themselves. And that's where I've centered my conversation on, is how does that really look for a non-Chinese potential business? And I've come at that from a UK perspective. There's a big distrust of certainly from any disruptor players, international players who are coming in and are looking to disrupt the existing marketplace. And some have come and gone, and some disruptors are struggling to find sort of traction. Recent example would be MoviePass in the United States. They came in, they didn't really get buy-in from the industry themselves, and they burnt through probably close to $500 million and are out of business. And as a result, they were sort of warded off. And that is one thing that will come out here. They were sitting on data, and they didn't show that data, and that was one of the questions I sort of wrote down. Is Moyan, they have consultancy services, but I wonder how transparent that data is for the other companies who don't pay, because that's still one of the problems we have here in the developed markets. All right, but really at the end of the day, is this whole matching of demand and supply, because that's what this is about, using data to match audiences to content, or to match the content to the audience. Sometimes it's both ways. But effectively, our audience is losing out by having terrible viewing experiences, having not the right content in front of them, or actually never being able to find anything that they want to use for their time. So I've just come at this in essentially a way of how does the current source of data look? So from an exhibitor distributor, what does it look like in the UK, the ecosystem? Well, it starts off very much, if you're engaging with real customers, you're a cinema chain, you can sell tickets. So you can have an online booking, you can get customer data, loyalty database, etc. Very basic form, but you start to accrue data. And please bear in mind, you can only see your own data in our world because of the legislation of the UK and certainly of Europe. Sharing personal data is a very, very troublesome thing. And the UK creative economy is such a vast contributor to the UK, you would argue that more sharing should come out. But actually, people still keep that data in. So personal data can't go because of legal reasons, but also, again, going back to my previous point, commercially, it's kept back for personal gain, commercial exploitation. Then we move on to sales and tickets. Yes, there's ticket sales, and you can see what tickets are being sold in the venue, and that information will be passed on to distributors, but only for their own films. There are marketing data platforms, and I've mentioned a few of the more sort of known CRM systems, certainly in the film and exhibitor world, such as Movio, who part of the Vista group. But then there's new Salesforce applications that are coming out, and CRMs or customer data platforms such as Intercom, basically allows you to track and store data and preferences, and is in a way going a little bit towards what they're achieving in one location. But these are all bought-in services. Each company will approach that based upon its own data strategy, and some are using it to book and such as View cinemas. They're using an algorithm to base booking decisions on. Other cinema chain such as Everymankers and Picture House based upon using data to a limited extent, but it's all humanly done. Transaction sales data, that is isolated. There's strict rules and regulations about payments. I know we mentioned about payments previously in this panel, but effectively the payment side of things is really heavily regulated. PCI compliance is just one, and there are major sort of restrictions around what can happen about payment. And then from that is device and mobile data. So that again is stored separately. How do you access that? Again, with the laws and restrictions, but you can access some of that information if it's your own end customer. So if you have an established legal contract relationship with them, but you can't just passively take that information. Now, all of that is just internal data. Now, when you go and look externally, there is a variety of data sources that you can look at from in the film ecosystem. What is that? Well, there's ComScore, there's IBO box office data. That data is there, or Numero, which is the upcoming fledgling upstart to tackle ComScore. Those guys are providing film performance data. It's a bit like Box Office Mojo, but it's a paid for service. You can only access it if you pay for it or you're part of the industry. There's distribution platforms such as iTunes and Amazon and any paid TV outlets, Sky Store. Those platforms will send you at the end of every month a bland generic data set based upon a number of streams or sales that have happened for your product that you've licensed to them. That information is very sort of useless in a way. It just gives you an idea of how much was sold, but it doesn't give you any real data, and it's quite often delayed. And that's one of the things certainly Mayan had, was a very, very sort of time to decision period was very short, whereas here this can take to 60 to 90 days delay. So you don't get to aggregate this data until all of that sort of information validity is gone in a way. Marketing, there's certainly the social platforms, as we know, Facebook and Google are tracking and providing a data set for you, but it's all anonymous. You don't really know how and who those customers are, so you can approach certain segments in certain ways, obviously, if you pay the money. There's research panels, there's Nielsen, there's Rentrack, and there's the BFI themselves, etc. But that is paid panel data, and that data is a percentage of the population or audience group and then extrapolated out. So it's not real data, it's panel data, and therefore there are countless flaws with that. So the reliability of it is tentative, you know. And then finally, there is these new sources of data. There's Muso, the anti-piracy data. They've got a great panel of data to look at the piracy usage out there and consumption and where they are in the world. And you can now start to provide advertising to those pirates before they pirate, and there's predictive processes involved, which is actually very good if you're willing to be a bit innovative in that space and try and convert some of those pirates before they are pirate. You have Showtime Analytics, who are part of Alibaba. You know, Power Analytics for trying to do TV and SVOD sort of scorecard assessments based upon social listening and performance, what they believe is a valid score of a particular piece of content, and an appetite of consumption, but it's not real demand, it's just assumptions based upon a set of rules. And then you've got smaller players such as Groovy in Denmark, who are trying to help the film community and film distributors and exhibitors find film audiences specifically, and then they're targeted on film. But their data platform is growing, but it's still small. Certainly nothing to the scale of what we saw. And I've just kind of put on here what's the differences between these data. It's in essence, these points are you can keep going. There's just some of them, but it's about reliability and it's about access. And I think if you would all of these, whether it's who owns the data and how you can access it and how you can manipulate it, use it to your commercial need, or then how can you use that? That's the parameters what makes this data different. Okay, so what I've tried to do is to kind of outline a little bit of what and how data will be used really in an ecosystem. So how will we evaluate that data in a way that certainly possibly competes with the way that Moyen are doing it from a real big data perspective, and they're affecting change based upon a real output and their appreciation scoring, etc. That doesn't happen in certainly in our ecosystem. So what is it that can happen? So if you can remember on the side, the sources of data that are coming through the system, what we're trying to do is get relevance and context for that sort of information that's coming through and try and make it relevant for the end user or potential audience, or someone then to come back and have a repeat custom. Certainly the repeat custom piece is where the value is at. So from an integration and a storage point of view, that is then stored and it starts to be, I guess you could say, analyzed and interpreted based upon a set of rules. From that, we can look at device data within your own ecosystem. You can look at omni-channel, multi-channel data, and you can start to compare that to say, okay, certain engagement in certain platforms, how does that look and what is it? Are there segments that we can make out of this? And I think from my understanding of what possibly Moyen are doing it in major clusters, because the country is so big, certainly in Europe and in the UK's perspective, we'll probably be doing that down to city level or even down to cinema level or genre level, but certainly the volume and size that they're doing would just blow anything out of the water what we would be looking at. And then you start to put some predictive data. So you try to curate the film based upon the audience segmentation. Well, if these segments have a sort of propensity or willingness to go to this type of film, should we show those films in the venue or should we commission that film? So it's a slightly different approach of this to come to the same outcome as what Moyen are achieving, but this is just using existing incumbent infrastructure, and that is effectively a cinema going experience or a distributor data experience, which is quite often anonymized because we don't have that in relationship. And then you start to push that out via using marketing techniques or in the venue. And how does that audience channel then feed the information out on a kind of consistent, effective basis? And quite often we're in a time economy, we're competing for people's time. Certainly that message going out and the attrition piece and the P&A or just generally, if it's not a P&A or an exhibitor, the efficiency of the marketing to draw audiences into the venue is going to be the question of success. How effective is that marketing? How responsive are the audience to come in? And in reality, the data doesn't have to be from an audience perspective. It can come back in to allow from a programming perspective. As I mentioned, new cinemas are using algorithms to book their screenings, to book the cinemas, the films in there. Obviously, how does that work if there are no films to book? And that's one of the things that quite the algorithm needs to be fed. And if it doesn't get fed, what happens in those circumstances? I'm sure there's a manual override of sort. Potential acquisition model of films and commissioning and production, and certainly Moyen are using that. So in my experience, we've been looking at ways about using real data to inform upstream value. So about acquisition of content, acquisition of rights, licensing, or even going into production and commissioning. And certainly then from a strategic point of view, do we launch new products, new services? Is there an appetite in a particular area? And then really the customer relationship. So the feedback that we saw in Moyen is very, very digital, very automated. That digitization, although we're a developed market, it isn't so pronounced here in the UK and in Europe. People are very digital and smartphone penetration and use is very high. But actually what you find is people are less willing to go to one location to do everything. So therefore that fragmentation in itself means there's going to be some missing components to the data set. And some assumptions will have to be made. So therefore, that we have quite often used customer feedbacks, real panel and testing and prototype testing as a way of kind of going with a development-led approach to making the offering or making the film selection, etc. All right, I've got 2 more slides, so I'm going to be quick. The legal framework in all of the countries around the world is different. Certainly China and the UK has a complete different legal framework. And as a result, data and the engagement with data is highly restricted here. As a result, I've only put a few of these points down here, but from a business and from an audience, the thing that's in between them all is legislation and rights. If somebody wants to be involved with a company and wants to give them their data, that is consent, and that is okay. But also you can engage with a company and you don't have to give them their data. So the business will need to be able to operate on an anonymous basis. It has to. So what happens in those situations? And yes, those segmentations can happen in a anonymous, but you start to see a slightly different data model where that world of full data doesn't exist. And whilst you can probably get around that for some of the sort of sophisticated predictive analysis, certainly on the scale that Moyen were working on, but on the scale of the UK, no. There are more compliance and digital rights and consumer rights and legislation, and the ability for audiences to be protected means that as a result, you engage with content owners and content in a very different way. And sometimes it's frustrating as a personal user, but as a business also, it's costly and something that needs navigating. Personal data needs to be stored in Europe, in European boundaries. It needs to have a data processor that's certainly clear and transparent and secure. And the consent needs to be consistently obtained. And if consent isn't, it needs to be excluded. And all of those techniques just need to be in place. And finally, I was asked what other things, and it's quite fortunate because some of the topics that we've already spoken about, and I love certainly at the start, the point of convenience about being able to watch these things is utmost and paramount. So what I've done is I just made 4 points of what I see, what I think are the areas of co-learning. For me, it's the audience engagement. How do we make it better for customers? How do we match demand and supply? And the modern techniques that certainly that we're seeing in China with full data, but how do we do that? How can we get better at predictive? I certainly looked at in this over the last few years and using data companies in America to achieve a way of predicting success or predicting a better likelihood of success based upon a set of parameters if we were to change decision making along the way. How do you manage such data on such mass? That to me on that scale is just unfathomable. I can't understand my head how you can get up to those billions of data points and manage it without corruption. That's a talent, and that's certainly a skill set which is missing here in Europe and in America for sure. And then how do we share it? Access and law I put into this in point 3. How do we make it equitable? How do we make that data transparent and available to everybody? If we do, there's commercial worry, I'm sure, but also at the same time, will it make it better for everybody? How do we enable transparency? What is the level of transparency we all would like? And everyone's asking Netflix and Amazon to share their data, but they don't. But if they did, would it make us better? Would we make better films? Would we distribute films? Would the relevance and context for the audience be better? Sure, perhaps. But then what's going to happen? What's the competitive advantage? And then commercially, I put disruption players here. And so how do you get industry buy-in? We mentioned MoviePass failing. How did Moyen and its sort of peers, how do they get industry buy-in to give them access to their data or to let them use their platform? Because it's chicken and egg. They wouldn't have had traffic if it wasn't for something. And then once traffic built, they needed more to keep feeding. What is it that we get to get buy-in? I'd love to know that. And yeah, that is it.
Okay, thank you so much. So, okay, we're just going to the discussion session soon because we kind of already surpassed the time for some while. So if all our speakers or the audience have any questions, please bring it up. And I'm sure, especially Philip and you will share a lot of experience of the data accessibility or just how to evaluation the data. So who is going to ask the first questions? And also, Xiang will also be the interpreter for us. So if Yu is going to ask questions or just answer the questions, we will still be able to interpret that.
Miss He, are you there?
Yeah, I heard. He, you prepared some questions, but I'm not sure if she's.
我在。
你可以提问一下，就是你想问的问题吗？我这边可以给你做一个翻译。
好，我就想问一下，有2个问题。第一个是说，在这个疫情的大环境下，那北美这边或者好莱坞这边一些原计划在院线上映的电影，改到了流媒体平台去首播，那电影的成本的回收的压力也就相应转到了这些流媒体平台上。那我想知道的是，流媒体平台是如何通过这种大数据分析来进行风险规避呢？
Wait, is John still with us?
能听到吗？
All right, yeah, I can hear. I thought Mengci is going to translate. And so He Yu's question is like during the COVID-19, many like North American and also maybe European film production films is going from movie theater to streaming, like online streaming platforms. So her question is, how does this online streaming platforms to like avoid some exhibition or distribution risk? I think that's what she asked.
I could have a chance of answering if you want. I think in reality, the window provides a great platform, and certainly has done since film began, as the exclusive platform for new release film content. That is no longer the case. It is no longer the only destination you can get new release film content. And the delta between theatrical films, so movies, the production budgets were always much bigger than television. Now, as we've seen, the streaming giants have certainly got production budgets equivalent to, or well, if not surpassing many film production budgets. So the difference between television or high-end television, streaming, and movies has merged. So as a result, many of the studios have seen this and restructured their businesses to enable a direct-to-consumer ownership. And why? Is because certainly it's their product getting to the consumer before anything else. And I think that is the first thing. So they're de-risking a lot of the risk that has with movie theatrical releasing, because quite often there are, certainly in many of the developed countries, the top 10, top 20 takes over half of the box office of that country. And the theatrical window in itself is such a competition for space, and certainly in the UK it's 20 to 30 new titles every week are coming on board that cinemas have to decide whether to take or not to take. Even if the films are successful, there's all of this constant disequilibrium between demand and supply of screenings now, of cinemas to distributors. So with all of that content being made and a lot of it just not finding a home, that streaming platform in a way is de-risking the value chain for the studios. So in the case of the pandemic, yes, there was no cinemas open, so therefore there was nowhere for these films to go. Now the question would be, all of those films that were delayed from last year, they've been pushed to this year. There's also this year's films, where do they go? So there's a big bottleneck of pent-up demand, but also supply. What happens to all of that supply? So really having that streaming platform, they're de-risking their business also by spreading it across the subscription business model. So ARPU, the success now is based upon churn, not purely ticket sales. It maybe was 1 or 2 films, 3 films that was released in a given year from a studio that pretty much paid for the entire year. And those success or failures would denote really or swing the performance of the studio for that financial year. That is a way now de-risked, because you've got the subscription streaming income that's come on board, that it doesn't sway so aggressively as a theatrical performance. Now, what we're seeing is at the moment, it's not a substitute for theatrical income, but what we're seeing is it's a stable platform for revenue. And I think if there's churn that happens on the platform, that is no way as aggressive as the swings for theatrical. So if they can find a way of releasing films theatrically and de-risk the lower end of their business through subscription income, their business model becomes a lot more less risky. And my last point, just to say, by doing things this way, it used to be many films would have the rights windows would have a long tail. It'll be spread over a series of different platforms of different assets. That profile is changing. It's now definitely becoming more future loaded. So it's theatrical window and streaming, pay one streaming. So first rights access, then everything after that, the value of those things are really going to drop quite considerably. So those revenue streams will slow down. So it'll be interesting to see how those business models take that into effect, because at the moment it's all about a land grab. And the marketing is only going to increase, their acquisition costs are going to rocket, but it will be really interesting to see about those IP assets coming through and what happens with them after they've finished on their own strategic platforms. I think I answered that in a very long way, but that's...
I think it all makes sense, and we have tried to translate it to...
Oh, right, sorry, yeah. I forgot your translation, sorry.
It's fine, we can just type, so we figured out.
I'm sorry.
So hopefully, so you already got most of what Philip meant. Or maybe Dr. Shen want to just join the conversation, or do you have another question for Philip? Oh, sorry.
Can I just ask, because I think I'm not really, I haven't been really following the film industry, but we all know that it's, in the US, there's Netflix. But what about in China? China still is, this kind of a subscription by Tencent and Alibaba, or is that there's any of these similar business models? And also, I'm just wondered why UK we don't have that. Philip possibly can tell us why UK do not have that. And is it because of the IP assets? In my view, I found the UK have such a good products. I haven't mentioned that. Actually, I watched it's the kind of a private, it's a very low budget film. It is about someone is, made redundant, and they had the really trouble getting, because he had a heart problem, and tried to get back to work or get to the money from the job centers, etc., etc. These kind of movies are very low cost, but it's a very well made, I feel. But you haven't really seen it in the public space. So why, I'm just wondering why UK do not have an organization or the business like a Netflix, because the UK has got the really the wonderful movies out, movies or TV series out there.
Okay, so basically it's a question for both Heyu and Philip. So the question for Heyu is basically why China doesn't, or does China have some platform like Netflix? 就是说中国有没有像奈飞这样子的一个大的网络平台呢？就是因为沈老师现在还不是特别清楚这个状况，要不贺老师你先说一下。
好，其实中国这边有很大的一个视频平台，现在最主流的包括 腾讯、爱奇艺和优酷是3大的网络视频平台。需要
Yeah, so actually, China has many like big online streaming platforms. For example, Tencent, iQIYI, and Youku is the the biggest 3 online streaming platforms, quite similar to Netflix.
Thank you.
Sorry.
但是补充一句，其实他们我觉得最大的区别是，他们其实在电影院就是在电影的就是上游，其实他们的能力还是不太够的，就不如奈飞，他们可以自己产出一些非常有品牌、有影响力的剧或者是电影。但是在中国这边，大部分这3个平台基本上还是以一些就是别的片方的输入为主，自己的这个影响力比较弱一些。
Actually, these 3 platforms is quite different from Netflix in terms of the film production part, because it's not like Netflix has very strong like production crew and cast, so they can do this like big production series or films more properly. But this like in this sense, these 3 platforms is kind of more relies on like other like external content, external films to give them like more product to stream online.
Okay, so I guess the second question is also for Philip. Like, why doesn't UK have this big online streaming platform such as Netflix, or basically have such a global impact?
Well, from the first part of that question, it's because of history. So pretty much Sky took control of what they call the pay TV market, and they took control of that certainly in the late 80s, early 90s, and pay TV was very much the controller. All rights was secured around Sky's platform, and as that happened, they took long-term licenses. All the movies, etc., would all go through Sky, and it was the only destination. Many platforms came and went trying to compete against Sky but couldn't break it. Then over time, the cable industry consolidated down from maybe 6 players down to 1. It's called Virgin Media now, but effectively it's Liberty Global. And in reality, it's just pure competition. And then the sort of proliferation of sort of broadband and the speed at which people could consume content at home got better, and the quality got better. So that's when, just at the right time, well, at the same time, the US started to see the expansion of Netflix and Amazon and streaming services. And the rights started to get fragmented. So many of the rights holders started to realize that their pay TV, potentially future income stream, was sort of going to slow down because Sky was starting to slow on its growth. So then they started to license out to these new ventures, to whom became, at the time, they were selling rights to Netflix and Amazon for crazy prices, but they didn't think that they were going to grow as fast and as big as they did. And now there's a plethora of offerings. There's so many niche services and as well as the bigger services to which you can consume your content depending on your appetite and preference. But again, there's competition law that stops one party dominating the marketplace in the UK. I don't know if that exists in China, but certainly the UK competition law and even EU competition law at the higher courts, that is regulated in a way that stops dominance and it tries to encourage market competition. So that's why it's always been a little bit careful about which platform has. Apple and Google are getting in a little bit of tight spots right now about their consumers' access in the app stores and the rights for other platforms to have access to this destination, market stall, as it were. Does that answer?
Yes, I think that's the issue, I feel is so important about, because of these, for example, Apple's, Amazon and Netflix, they have got Sky. They've got these products and then they've got data. And now we see the changes, the governments now try to break the monopoly. So, I just wonder, because it is not this IP monopoly, actually it's the data monopoly.
Mm-hmm.
But the data monopoly, you can use the national security matters to argue that's important. Yeah, you have to hold it in your hand, in the sovereignty. So in this country, so I'm just wondered, what may be the future that, because the UK is such a good, I think it's leading the world, trend in terms of the, creative culture industry, but we don't have that, facilities, the network, the stronger players. So what would be the future? Do you think cooperate with China with something?
Ultimately, people generally, as a whole, the general population, if it makes their lives better, they will use it. And we're generally, again, the human nature, we're quite lazy as we're happily use voice assistants to do jobs for us that we otherwise would have done ourselves. You would ask the question to tell you the weather, whereas you would have picked up a newspaper and checked to see what the weather is, or turn the television on. It makes your life better. So therefore, people are quite often willing, if they can see the value and the value proposition in giving their data away, they will. The problem that we have, there's been a few recent episodes of this, that data is being used in sort of a non-trustworthy way, which has meant people are very cynical about their own data use. And that might be, we've had the sort of Cambridge Analytica scandal, we had the Facebook kind of, all of that kind of approach with data and how people's data are being used. And then there's now this sort of track and trace piece for the pandemic. Even though we're trying to protect lives, there's still a resistance about giving personal data over, and you're giving people choice in that respect. I think if you give people a lot of choice, they'll become sort of skeptical. So really they're the two main principles, I would say, really, is just if we can get a lot of trust. So that comes with transparency. That's why I made the point earlier on about how much of Mayan's data is transparent to everybody, because if you make it transparent to everybody, there's very little to hide. However, it's when it then gets used for sort of malice purposes, then it becomes what can you do to stop that? Yeah, that's it. That's really it. It's those divergence of those two, unfortunately.
Do you think that the government needed to play a role in it? Because if you look at China, actually China's to get rid of all these, the Facebook and Google's, then they have the data as a hold in the hand of whatever situations in the country, so they can have a share. And but here, and in any case, Google's, Apple's, Facebook, Amazon, they are all US companies. Or Sky, is holding the Murdoch's family's hand. That things the government needs to, I feel the government needed to play a role. And Ming is focusing on the argument. It is the security of the data. Just my thinking.
Yeah, I think the culture and society is very different, and the foundations and principles of you don't have to look too far between the countries that made a big success of sort of managing the pandemic versus the ones that didn't. And the UK and America are certainly the ones that have struggled, because they've been promoting the freedoms of democracy and the rights of decisions of the individuals. And as a result, it's quite hard to say to people, no, you can't do something, when you're trying to protect lives and to stop this pandemic. At the same time, it's in the law of the land that you are free to do as you wish in a democracy. So it's very difficult to then say you're going to start managing certain companies not. And I think just purely from a textbook economic point of view, if you start meddling like that, it becomes very highly inefficient. And you start having intervention at different points, it becomes very inefficient. So what is it that would make that? I think quite often, again, it's if you can see the positive benefits and the value perception of something, and it's transparent, over time, success will come with that. You will get to the point where certainly Mayan are doing some of those amazing things. That's where it will come. It won't come by the government taking control. And once you start having to manage all of that personal data and trying to, then it gets very difficult. And each industry will then say, I want access to that, and it gets. I think certainly in developing countries, the digitization of of such a large population and a sparse population is much more beneficial to society as a whole. So therefore it's better that the state manages it. So in a cashless environment, developing countries, they don't need to have that worry of the risk of cash in the regions. If you can digitize it and people can be taught, it's also a way of getting across sort of any sort of literacy, sitting in India and things like that, where they've got people who are, you know, below the breadline. That is a way of using digital and data in a way that's very different to a developed market.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you very
So a
much.
bit off topic.
Well, we have one audience raise the hand, so I will let the audience ask a question, and He will ask another question. Is that right? So, hi, Yan Li.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Yan Yang. I'm a Liverpool Research Fellow. I'm conducting my funded research project, UK and the co-production films between the UK and China as soft power for the both countries. Thank you for Philip and He Yu's fascinating talk. I got two questions for each of you. So, He Yu, 我想问一下，就是海外公司在中国电影市场的那个市场表现如何？如果说我们猫眼研究院有相关的数据的话，你是不是可以跟我们分享一下，就是这些海外的这个电影公司近年在中国市场上的表现？然后他们的关于他们的市场策略是不是跟中国一样？我猜应该是大体上是相同的。但是我想知道说，现在对所有的电影公司来说，对于中国的一线城市和二线城市，他们的市场策略是不是会有很大的区别？这是对何玉的问题。谢谢。Another question I want to ask Philip. Both in the context of the Chinese film market has developed as the largest one in the world by 2020. So, and in the context of Brexit, would you see rising trending of British or UK producers would be, you know, more interest in Chinese market, or, you know, if that's a trend, if it's the trending, what are the strategies? If not, why? What are the main factors hindering them to do that? So, but you know, in the theoretical fact, from the theoretical framework, we will assume that more and more international producers would be interested in Chinese market. But according to the report of the China-UK co-production report, you know, since China and the UK signed the co-production treaty, there are only like 2 or 3 UK and Chinese film had been distributed in the UK, in China actually. For example, the documentary film One Amazing Day, made by BBC and a Chinese company. So I want to hear, you know, your expertise, you know, your opinions on this. Thank you.
Okay, so for so this audience has one question for He Yu. She was asking what is the performance of overseas film company in mainland China's film market, and is the marketing strategies similar to the Chinese ones, to the Chinese companies, or and also in terms of the marketing strategies to first-tier cities and second-tier cities, like what is the difference?
那我这边先来回答。我理解他问的问题是说，海外的这些电影公司其实应该是对应的是这些对于我们来说叫做外片嘛，对，应该是说这些外片的表现。那其实公司这边的我们这边之前没有具体整理过，但其实最主流的还是像迪士尼啊，然后传奇这种 这种公司会多一些，包括索尼，因为他们基本上手里是那种非常大的 IP，中国就观众非常喜欢的，包括这个漫威的系列，然后包括一些像速激，然后还有一些什么007这种系列，其实都是中国观众非常喜欢的，所以整体的票房也非常的高。另外就是
Sorry, let's Sean maybe interpret that also for our audience.
Okay, thanks. So basically, the overseas film companies in Chinese film market is the very mainstream ones. For example, like Disney, Sony, and also the films they produce is also really popular blockbusters. So and it's also hit really high box office in China, in mainland China.
抱歉，我刚才忘了停顿。然后是这样，我们其实会发现，像一些不同的就是外片吧，在这边的表现和它吸引的人群其实有不太一样的地方。它的人群受众不太一样。然后另外，刚才有提到是说你先翻译吧。
Okay, thanks. So, so this foreign foreign language films, the performance is really depends on their targeting audience. They target different kind of audiences.
那比如说像漫威系列的观众，他可能相对会更年轻一些，然后像 DC 系列的观众，他可能在年龄上稍微会年长一点，这是我们之前看数据的一些发现，就是购票观众的一些发现。
For example, Marvel's film is kind of targeting really young audiences, and other films may target on other film companies may targeting on older generation or other generations.
然后另外是从城市级别上的话，其实不同的城市线，它这边的受众的喜好度也不太一样。比如说像喜剧这种类型，在3、4线是非常受欢迎的。那比如说在南方的一些城市，进口片，比如说外片或者港片是非常受欢迎的。所以不同区域还有不同城市线之间，他们确实存在着比较大的这种口味上的差异。
So in terms of different tiers of the cities, it's the films favorite films are also quite different. For example, in relatively small cities or rural areas, comedy is the most popular ones. But for southern areas, maybe coastal areas, they more prefer foreign language films or Hong Kong films.
我这边都 OK 了。
Okay, yeah, that's all.
So I guess it's Philip's turn.
Okay, I won't compete with that. Mine will be quite quick. I think the reasons for are one, the quota. I think there's obviously a limit on the quota, the amount of films that can be put through the theatrical release into the marketplace in China, for one. And then secondly, really, I think it's just the sheer size and the sort of scariness of the market, the lack of expertise and knowledge. And that's where that data and transparency, if it was ever made available, that understanding of the market would just prove, because a lot of the films, I guess you would consider, certainly they're not mega blockbuster, they're not the must-see films from America, so it's not Avengers or anything of the sort. But again, the size of these films are probably considered niche in that market. So therefore, how do you tackle a niche theatrical release in a market where it's not a native language? I think that would be something. So knowing, again, the coastal kind of data result that you just mentioned, that knowing that information and being able to sort of use it in effect to make a release would be really important. So therefore, I guess it's finding the right partners to help you release that. Now, there are a few, but certainly some of the studios are going in, but then everyone possibly is scared of censorship of what the content is. And certainly when it comes to independent film by nature tends to be slightly more edgy, slightly more, I guess, sort of prone to being picked up by the censor for different reasons, and so be it. But that also is another issue. It's another, certainly it's not something they need to consider apart from the Middle East, where they wouldn't allow certain scenes and things like that. So yeah, I think it's just fear of the unknown, to be really fair.
Okay, thank you. Well, hope that answers your questions as well. Yeah, I think you also have another question for Philip and Dr. Shen.
是这样，我想问一下，因为其实国内就是在中国，因为疫情之前有影片由电影院就是首播变成了就是线上播放，那我想问一下，是说那在英国这边，那如果是产生这样的一个电影，因为其实它到院线去，它到网上去首播以后，其实它的观影的场景和它的人群都其实发生了很大的变化。那这种变化对它的一些商业性的影响是怎么样的？比如说，对于口碑、对于票房，它的影响是更积极的吗？还是说，消极的、负面的影响会更多一些？
I think this question is Philip should answer.
Sorry, should I interrupt? Should I translate first? Yeah. So Huy's question is, during the pandemic in China, like many films, they're like a theoretical premiere translated to like online. But so her question is about like in the UK, what kind of like strategies do they do during the pandemic? Like, because like if you move films online, the environment, also the audience, there's like a lot of like a big difference. So in terms of the like a commercial impact, is the like reputation like changed, or is like the audience group, like if there's like a variation, or is it like a positive or negative impact for that?
Yeah, I think basically it's about the audience feedback, because they used to have give the feedback probably to the venues, but now if it's all online streaming, so how do the production companies or distribution companies get the feedback, and where the feedbacks change? Yep. In terms of the rating, or yeah.
I think from the feedback question, I think there's going to be a delay.
Okay.
So at the moment, people are watching content in their homes. We're under lockdown, so we're not allowed out. That certainly is the case where consumption, whether it's good or bad, will be consumed in the home, and that will take time to trickle out, certainly. And people might go on social media, but you know, still it's for quality feedback. Go into the venues when they start to return. From a film distributor perspective, it's going to take time to trickle to them. From a new release content perspective, so a lot of the films that were sort of set for release have either been postponed or they were released during lockdown on a premium VOD basis. Now, I'm an advocate of premium VOD. I believe it's a choice for the consumer, and it's a convenient choice, and it doesn't replace. It's not a kind of a binary that versus that. It actually is just about allowing a consumer in a time economy to make a valid choice. And so long as it's not priced at a big differential, and there is parity in the pricing decision, it's about convenience. If you make that choice about convenience, people will still come to the cinema. They will still consume at home, but actually it just allows a greater consumption. And during lockdown, we know that Disney have tried different strategies, and all of the majors have tried strategies to release films on a premium VOD basis. And whilst they haven't replaced the theatrical in its full entirety in some cases, it has been successful because someone has engaged with that piece of content that perhaps they otherwise wouldn't have. And I think it comes down to risk. One thing I didn't mention on the last point about entering the Chinese market, it's effectively a game of risk. How much money will you have to spend marketing-wise to get a result? And the same approach is here when it comes to releasing content during a pandemic. And the efficiencies gained from a day and date or PVOD release is much better than if you were to do a traditional release and try and hold it back because of piracy, etc. But with what Moyen are doing, they're very much de-risking the release even further by having that data to help, and their coefficient assessment allows effectively de-risk. And that is one thing that during lockdown, many people tried to do, was they had to release this film. The risk was in the film, it was in the budget, it was already spent, it was sunk. How are they going to get the return on that investment? And to put it out on premium VOD. That's what they did. Many explored premium VOD, and many distributors now, certainly in the UK and Europe, have now launched their own direct-to-consumer streaming option, which is very confusing for consumers.
Yeah, I see. Well, and also I see humans back to join us. So I guess does any other audience have any questions or?
I do have a question. I'm going to jump in there for both Philip and He Yu. I'm going to speak in English and also in Chinese. So Philip, do you feel or do you see the model of how Maoyan is operating in China now can become something quite interrupted for the UK's market? Or do you think this Maoyan's model could work for the UK's film industry? So I'm going to repeat this in Chinese. 贺老师，我的问题是，你觉得就是像英国现在的情况，刚刚 Philip 也介绍过了，像猫眼的话，你觉得就是有没有机会在将来会进入英国的市场呢？谢谢。
I won't answer in Chinese, sorry. In Mandarin, I definitely will. The answer to that, yes. I think ultimately you have to look at what the market is looking now. So we have a market that's been disrupted because of the pandemic. There is pent-up demand to go back to the cinema, but no one really knows in what quantities and in what form, for what films, or in timing of. If there was a platform in place that allowed consumers to engage with film, but on a centralized basis, it will take time to build that model. But I believe if we can find a way of transparency, yes, because it will benefit the end user and it will benefit the introvert nature of the industry as a whole. I do believe it. I don't know if it will work in exactly the same way, but certainly I'm going back to the slide where I saw the pyramid and you had the different value chains. That is really, in essence, what is missing. And I think that being brought to Europe and the greater sort of wider world would really, really benefit the industry as a whole. Yes.
那个，请问是陈老师对吗？
对，是陈老师。
哎，那个陈老师你好，那个我能再想问一下，就是您刚才具体的问题吗？就是您是说像猫耳进入英国的市场，是说以这种以电影的方式，还是说以这样一个大的数据平台的方式？我其实没有太明白。
就是以就是数据平台的方式，作为一个第三方，首先是作为第三方电影票的售票的一个 APP 这样的形式，然后逐步的就像猫眼怎么样在中国发展的，在英国这里也慢慢建立起一个体系。
So He Yu also has a question to a human. She was asking if human can repeat her question and elaborate a bit more. And human side is like so she's trying to asking if Maoyan can be as kind of like a third party, like a ticketing platform to get into the UK film market.
其实陈老师问我的问题是一个应该是由我大老板来回答的问题，但我猜他应该很想进入，就是以 APP 这样的形式来进入或者其他的合作形式来进入英国的市场。那以现在我们跟海外合作的情况看，其实已经有很多的海外的片方在跟我们做内地的，就是大陆这边的合作了，包括很多电影都会跟我们这边有数据或者是一些宣传发行上的联合合作。基本上比如说像前2天我们也刚刚去聊了索尼这边，所以基本上今年所有这边在中国上映的电影，索尼这边都会跟我们这边来进行一个数据的打包合作。全年的年框这样。对，所以其实我们在国内跟6大都合作的很好，当然也非常有希望就是能 能进到就是英国的市场。对，这应该是老板非常希望看到的。
So his answer is, oh, actually, your question is our boss will be really willing to answer. So actually, we are like willing to like join to get into the UK's film market, and also we have a lot of like collaborations with other like foreign film companies. We also have some like cooperation with like a big data like sharing. So we had this like collaboration with Sony last year. So basically, most of the big films in Sony, we have like we cooperate with them with the marketing and promoting and also data sharing.
May I just one point to add? It's very important to mention that having a central ticketing platform for cinema does not exist in the UK, and that change of behavior will take some time for consumers to understand. At the moment, the control, so if you want to buy a ticket, is controlled by the exhibitors. To break that control, they will need buy-in, and again, it goes back to the movie pass analogy that we mentioned. To come in and disrupt the market, there has to be a benefit, and that value has to go to the B2B side as well as the B2C.
Okay, thanks for your answer.
I think this is precisely what the panel is aiming for today, is because I think how myself and my colleague Sally and Mengci, we really yourself too, Philip, we really see the necessity and the need for something like Maoyan to happen in the UK in order to bring some new energy to the market, for the next phase onwards post-pandemic. So I guess we now know that Maoyan is interested in entering to the UK market or going overseas or internationally. So I think we've already successfully built up the platform for the further conversation to happen. So I'm going to say that in Chinese too, just to tell them that if they would like to enter the UK, they should go and find Philip in Chinese. 贺老师就是其实 Philip 就今天我们邀请的嘉宾，他是非常有经验的，在这个整个电影数据的分析跟收集这一块，所以我觉得将来如果猫眼真的有兴趣想要进入到英国跟欧洲的市场的话，其实他会是一个非常就是接地气而且非常有经验的一个顾问。对，我们也非常希望能看到猫眼这样的那个 APP 能在英国落地生根，然后带一种新的能量跟新的一种动力吧，就是把这个整个电影的市场再重新激活起来。对，
好，我们也非常希望能有这样的合作机会，真的是很想有这样的。
She would appreciate this kind of collaboration as well. I think that's what she was saying.
Fantastic. Well, good luck. I have to go. But
yes,
unless there's any other questions, it's been really interesting. I love seeing what's being done in the different market. It's fascinating, and I've certainly done it on a lot smaller scale. But being able to bring effect to positive change for the end movie user, that's really impressive. And to see results, it really works. That's enough for me. I'm sold. Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure we will have more chances to communicate and hopefully collaborate between the industries. So okay, I guess it's the end of the panel, and thanks everyone for coming. And last, just to remind everyone the ongoing Chinese cinema season, so you can check the platform on the check the program via the platform, the ChineseFilm.uk. And we have 4 more panels, and also the tickets you can get online. Hopefully we'll see you at the other panels. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Be safe.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.